I'm not seeing it yet.
It's delayed about 15, 20 seconds, I think live streams are usually.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So
All
we're live
right. Let
now.
me get back to. All right. So, today, I think it was on Facebook, I saw this thing about um, Jesus Christ was married and had two kids, and it just popped up, and I was like, "What the heck?" And I just decided to do a stream about it off the bat. Um, Come to find out, it was a story that was in Christianity Today in July that somebody picked up on Facebook finally, and it was a remake and a Christianity Today story of the a 2014 story of this book that came out. It was called The Lost Gospel,
Yeah. Yeah.
and for the life of me, I cannot find a name for it. Um, Usually the scholars, they always have a designation at the least, and in the articles that talk about it, they um they just don't give what the scholars are calling it. So what the manuscript is, except that for that it's 1400 years old and in the British Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And this fella evidently found it or whatever, and looked at it and started coming up with all these stories. Now, the interesting thing is, in 2014 was a time that I decided that I wanted to read all of the um, non-canonical Christian writings,
Yeah,
and I
like the
mean all of
apocryphal
them.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
well, not only there, I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of writings
Yeah.
that aren't even included in what we call the apocryphal writings. Those are semi-accepted according to some Christianities,
Right. Right.
and I love to use the term Christianities. I'm sure you've probably heard me say Christianities,
Yeah.
and I think it's probably something that Bart Ehrman has kind of coined. And
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
until you study the Gnostic Gospels, um, which is like throwing all of Christianity into one punch bowl and saying that your fundamentalists are the same exact thing as a Unitarian Universalist that doesn't even claim there's a God, even, you know,
Right.
but they're
Yeah.
pseudo Christian, you know. But if you look at those Christianities, they were even wider and more bizarre than what we have now.
Yeah.
There were sects that believed that God was the bad guy. In fact, a lot of the Gnostics did. God was a abomination from his mother, who basically had sex with herself and created this abomination. Well, he was stupid and didn't know that he wasn't the highest God. That's why he said, I am the one true God, because he didn't understand that he was just this lower abomination and they weren't going to show themselves to it, you know. And so
Yeah.
Lucifer was actually the good guy to come to tell everyone that God, Jehovah, whatever you want to call it, was the bad guy. I mean, so they get bizarre. And
Mm-hmm.
what the story is, this is a true document. I do know that, and this is, I think, kind of what the Da Vinci Code thing was based off of.
I believe so.
And
Yeah.
I think it was actually based off of this guy's work. Just looking at it, I know he actually got sued. The fellow who wrote the Da Vinci Code for plagiarizing or basically taking from somebody else's work. And I think this is it. I wish I knew how to put this on the main screen. I know there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
What, let's see what I know what I can do. I probably can put it. See if I can do this. Okay, there's a link to the story
Yeah.
that I'm looking at now. As I read through this story, it was really great because I didn't really pay attention to who wrote it. And at the very bottom, the last words are, "Though it was written centuries after he died." And this is a
Mm,
Egyptian writing called the Gospel of Jesus's wife. So what they're trying to say is that there were other writings that referred to a wife of Jesus, and they say though it was written centuries after he died. Well, this document that this whole theory was taken from is 1400 years old. So that means it was 600 years after Jesus is said to have lived. And then
right.
all of a sudden, this story pops up. You think it
Yeah.
could have been made up if it took 600 years to finally appear?
It was just somebody's fan fiction, you know.
Exactly. And a lot of that's exactly what I call, people don't like this, but the Gospels. The Gospels literally are, we think of historical fiction, but if we think of it in a different way, we have a historical setting, and then we put people we know and characters that we want, and they interact in that historical setting. So it's a
Right.
historicalized fiction. In other words, they're writing it to make it a real story. Um, the Back to the Future movies made an excellent telling and showing of kind of how that works. How if you're in the future, you can kind of, and you already know what happened in the past, you can write that story and do whatever you want to with it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but so looking at the story of Jesus is said to have had a wife and two kids. Of course, that wife is Mary Magdalene. Of course, right? I mean, who else could it be? And it reminds me of this whole story. Like I said, it's written 600 years later, and it's a historicalized fiction. But this being said, you cannot say that the people who wrote this, or the person who wrote this, did not believe it.
Sure. Yeah.
They may have completely believed it. They may have been making it up, but they probably believed it.
Yeah. They
It was
very
probably
likely heard
genuine
it
to
from
them.
somewhere else too.
And a lot of the stories also, as we think of history now, we think of a accurate account of concordant events, or a factual account of concordant events. That's what we think of history.
Yeah.
And the example I use for these type of writings is The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Mm,
Is a story true? Well, yeah, it's a really bad idea to tell lies all the time. It's going to bite you in the ass. So
right.
is a story, The Little Boy Cried Wolf, true? Absolutely. I would argue it is. It's a great story. It, is it a factual telling of concordant events? No,
No.
it's
Most likely not.
yeah, we know it's a made up story, and a lot of these stories are also that way. That what really kills me is we don't know a lot of times if sect, what they believed was this a spiritual thing, and it was just in the heavens. Was this on earth? Was it even real, or was it just telling a
A
story of
parable.
yeah, was it a parable? What did
Yeah.
they think? And we don't know, and that's the real bummer when we look at these writings, because I guess I better back up a little bit. As a historian, and I consider myself to be an amateur historian. I did not go to school, but I put a lot of time into it. When this story came out, I had spent a year just looking at the every Gnostic gospel, every Dead Sea Scroll, everything that I could get up to, and including the works of Josephus. That means the works of Irenaeus and uh, uh, Justin, and all these different people. Um,
Mm,
and so you get to see how um, history, it's much like a, well, if you look at, like I say, if you want to understand religion, Christianity, study evolution.
Hmm.
And because each religion branches off, and some survive, the ones just like Daniel Ray describes in the God virus, whatever survives.
Right.
There,
Yeah. Yeah.
Dawkins also said pretty much the same thing.
No, it's definitely a really good comparison, because there's going to be small changes. Like, nobody just jumps from, into an entirely new
Hmm.
religion, but over time you just start adding things, changing things, without anybody really knowing. And then eventually, the Christians over here and the Christians over here, they're believing completely different things. They're worshiping completely different gods. It's just small changes over time.
I was I was trying to explain to a preacher um, a few months ago that everyone has their own God.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what I mean is you and I could have grown up in the same Sunday school and gone to church every Sunday, every youth group, every single thing identical. We're twins joined at the hip. But philosophically, what we believe our God, the example I use is, if you go into, let's say we go into a Sunday school ch-
Hmm.
church thing with a bunch of old folks. There's 30 old folks that they're all 70 plus. They've gone to
Yeah.
that same church for 50 years. If you ask them, does God love? What are they going to say? You
Yeah,
know?
they're going to say yes.
Yeah. But if you
Yeah.
take each one off individually and you say, how does God love? Now you're going to get the impression of what their God is for them.
Right.
Well, God's
Yeah.
with you when you're hurt and you've lost a loved one. God's with you, when you're getting married and starting a family. Whatever their God is, whatever they
Yeah.
value in their God is what you're going to get.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, just a very small example that demonstrates this, and it goes along with what you're saying. You take one Christian, and he believes that God literally helps his football team, win the game. But you got another Christian on the other side of the stadium, and he believes that his God, makes his football team win the game, when they win. Or then you got another Christian who believes that God doesn't even interfere with football games, right?
Right, right.
These three people all have a different God, because their God is doing something totally different. You got the
And
Auburn God, you got the Alabama God, and then you got the God that doesn't mess with football. You
and
know,
I kind of made fun of Matt Powell a little bit in a
that's easy to
video
do.
in a video that I made about him meeting his wife and getting married and so forth. And what he described was he went to go see Steve Anderson in Arizona.
Hmm.
There's a snowstorm. He met this girl. Oh God, can I just please see her one more time? Well, there's a snowstorm back home, and it snowed in for 3 days, so he got to court her and everything. Great story. Okay, and
Hmm.
so I researched it. 3 people were killed in that
Uh,
snowstorm
no.
as a result of the cold. Now, am I saying is Matt Powell's responsible for that? Of course not.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
Oh,
not.
no.
But you know what I'm saying? Of course
Yeah,
not.
no.
He's not responsible for it. And
Yeah.
and it has nothing to do with anything. But if his prayer worked, and that's how God did it, as he was insinuating in the video, that God made
Yeah.
it, possible to happen, and I'm very happy for him. Don't get me wrong.
Right. But his
You
little
know,
Hallmark Christmas story got 3 people killed.
yeah, exactly. And I really wanted to make a video about that because um if you look at his
That'd be a
video,
good video.
he makes a video about his marriage, and he goes through the entire courting.
I clicked on it one time, but I
The,
didn't watch it.
it's creepy. It's really creepy.
Mm.
It is literally, it is a standout video that everyone must see.
I hate giving that little fucker watch
And
time.
the reason is he goes through everything. he does a little bit of video with his now wife, and a little bit with him talking about the courting.
Mm,
And it goes step by step, every single expectation that you have to follow as a fundamentalist. Well, is this girl a Christian? Yes. Okay. Is she baptized? Yes. Is she going to our church? No. Okay. Is she going to the right church? Okay. Yes. Then she's going to come to my church, or the men's church. Okay. So that's okay. And then you know what I'm talking about. All these little steps. Okay, did
oh
you
yeah,
talk to the dad? Did you get the dad's approval? All these different things. And you have to do. Sometimes there's chaperones, sometimes not. But even how you date her and where you're seeing with her. Maybe you decide to go to an ice cream parlor and be a little risque.
right.
Yeah, you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking
Oh
about.
yeah.
I saw that. You go to an ice cream parlor with this girl and you're being a little risque, you know?
Mm,
It's like,
man, getting
ooh,
it on.
yeah, what are they really doing? If they're going to an ice cream parlor, what are they really doing?
You can do a lot of stuff with ice cream.
But you grew up in that culture. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to the T. Yeah.
And so
Um,
let's apply this to what we're talking about here. So we grew up in that culture 600 years ago. If we were in that same culture and we believed that Jesus was married and he had a couple of kids, what would we do? We'd probably write something like this.
mm,
You
yep.
know,
Yeah.
why not? So,
Mm,
but it shows you the character now and the character then, what these people, and this could have been pure fiction, but I usually, if the people, if took that much effort and it was in regards to religion, I don't know of anyone out and out lying about their beliefs and of ever being accused of it. All the early Eusebius, all those guys, they're pretty much taken at their word, for at least that's what they believed.
yeah.
Whether they lied about it or not, or the particular details and so forth, or whether they were source, they at least, we kind of have to accept that they believe what they say. We don't have
Which
a
I
choice.
think with Eusebius, there's a little bit of an exception there because unless I'm wrong, I believe it was Eusebius who, and I'm paraphrasing, said something along the lines that it is acceptable for the writers to take certain liberties
Oh yeah.
with the text.
Eh,
If it was for to confirm their theology. You know,
right. And
um,
as after Josephus, the first person we have is Eusebius, who has written anything, and that was, I think, around 150 ish.
yeah, and there were
Um,
several other church fathers and
and
whatnot
right.
who said that Eusebius was a little bit sketchy with his
Exactly.
practices.
That's exactly what I was getting to. He is the
Yeah,
like, if you're going to be a historian in history, he is the worst spoken of historian ever by all historians.
yeah, yeah.
So, like, you can't take anything he says for any. It's more. If you're going to look at his work, just think of it as literature, just fiction.
Yeah.
You know.
He was trying to create or remodel, I guess you could say, the religion of Christianity, and that was his agenda.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, he probably saw that it needed some tweaking, and he thought he could improve it a little bit, and that was kind of his mission.
Right, and when we
Much
have
more so than
Irenaeus.
accurately, translating history.
Right, and like in Irenaeus would have loved this. Um, he wrote against heresies, which was much later.
Mm,
I want to say 350s, something like that. Um, and a lot of these Gnostic sects were still running around. They
yeah.
weren't centralized like we think of churches today. They were not centralized at all. They were all like mini house churches. And,
Hmm.
one would write a scripture or whatever and copy it and give it to the next person that might make it to the next village. But there weren't congregations of people, together. There
Yeah.
weren't
Yeah.
large speakers or anything else. It was very, very small little sect, which is why it made it so easy to destroy it.
Yeah.
But this was the exact kind of writings that he was writing against, and against heresies. That is beliefs that were not as centralized, because by about 350 um, CE, everything starts getting pretty centralized,
Yeah.
particularly once we get
The
Constantine.
Catholic Church.
Yeah, Constantine and so forth, that makes this one particular sect have the most power. Now they've got the Roman government behind them, and they
Right.
can
I mean,
enforce whatever they want to.
they monopolized Christianity. You know,
They did
they
absolutely, and they
it's like,
centralized the belief systems.
yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of debate on when the Bible was actually canonized, but it was this group and this time exactly when is the exact reason why I can tell you about your experience and you can tell me about my experiences as fundamentalist, because
yeah,
it's that centralized.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as diverse as Christianities are now, it's still nothing compared to how diverse they were before. You know, the Roman uh, Empire, took over Christianity.
Absolutely. No, I wouldn't actually be surprised. This is 2014, so this is a fairly recent story, as far as archaeology is concerned.
Right, right.
um, I wouldn't be surprised in today's politics in the United States if another story comes up, a big story of. Remember the grave of was it James that was supposedly found?
I don't remember that one.
Brother of Jesus and so forth. And anyway, it went on, and there are so many Jameses and so many Jesuses that wouldn't mean anything anyway. Um, and
No,
there was nothing. It looked like it was kind of fudged. Unfortunately, there's a huge in Christianity, and this really kills me too. There's such a black market
yeah,
for any kind of artifact. I'm afraid if we find an actual artifact that said something like uh, um, David, ruler of the whatever of Jerusalem, it wouldn't be kingdom. We know that, but
yeah,
if we could even just find a receipt that had that, I think that would just be amazing.
yeah,
But the thing
yeah.
is even if we did find something and it was genuine, there are so many assholes out there in the black
Crying wolf.
market that it will disappear and then reappear, and then you don't know where it came from, and
Yeah,
it's junk. It
yeah,
doesn't mean anything.
yeah,
But if you knew exactly where it came from, you could verify that, then it would be an absolutely amazing piece of history found. you
yeah.
know um
And I don't think it's impossible that there could be a tomb of Jesus discovered one day. And again, I don't think that would prove anything. It wouldn't validate the theology of Christianity, but there very well may be a tomb that this Jesus who inspired these stories was put in. It's entirely possible. So I'm not even saying it's not out there, but the ones being proposed likely
Yeah,
are.
and the thing is we know there's at least what three fake tombs in three tombs in Jerusalem alone. I
Mm,
know there's at least two for sure. I think there's three
yeah, and there's
tombs in that area that are all attributed to Jesus, and
it's about like
there
Noah's
could
Ark.
have
There's
even
like three of
been.
them.
This is what is another bummer is, let's say Jesus was a historical person and he did inspire this entire religion.
Right. Yeah.
As a historian, that would be wonderful to know, because
Yeah.
then we could learn a lot more about the origin of the religion and learn more about human beings.
Absolutely.
But even 100 years after the legend began to build, or whatever you want to call it, people could have already been making fake tombs.
Yeah.
And so even if we found a tomb that said Jesus on it, it may not necessarily be that. It could have been done 100 years later, 150 years later. And with that type of short period of time, when you're disturbing soil and so forth, you'll never know, you know.
No, it could be there was an early.
And the reason, and I'm not trying to make a big conspiracy theory here, is what I'm saying is human beings, when we get into the religious aspect of things, we want monuments, we want things. And so if a certain rabbi, whatever, priest thought, you know what, these people really need a tomb so that they can just worship because otherwise they're not going to be happy. Boom, here's your tomb. Go worship there. Now let's follow the rites of the religion. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like a small fudge for the greater good, right?
That's how a lot of people look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a shame as a historian. You know, when you have those
Yeah.
doubts and you know there's those possibilities because you want the real thing. And what I say is, I don't care what history is. I want to know what history is.
Hmm.
I don't care if Jesus was an actual historical human being or not, as a historian. I would like to know, though,
Right.
because
Yeah.
then I can extrapolate and understand a lot more about human beings and how things are disseminated and so forth. You
Yeah.
see, but 2,000 years of Christian history does not care if Jesus was real or not real, if he was a human being or a not a human being. 2,000 years of history does not care, and it will not change. So it is important, and it is history, whether
Yeah.
it's based on a god or based on a human being or not. It's still all important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so these little things like this that boy, if I could figure out how to screen share, um,
I'm not sure.
they're they are really, really important, finding these little scraps of information, because then we can put together the past and so forth, that we can understand a lot better of where these things come from. And we at least now know that the Jews were actually Canaanites.
Hmm.
And is it, what country is it? Is it Lebanon? Yeah, Lebanese. If you want to see what Lebanese blood, they are 70% Canaanite, and they've done this by digging up actual Canaanites from 1,000 years ago, and still the people who are Lebanese, they are 70% Canaanite. And
Hmm.
so now we have three major divisions of Jews in the world, and I don't know the names. I wish I did, but you have like the Eastern Jews from Eastern Europe and so forth, the Western Jews, and there's another group. I think they're more from the Arabia and uh, uh, Africa and so forth. But the thing is that we know for a fact that from the records and everything that we can find, and the actual the artifacts that we can find, one, Jews, the Hebrews, were definitely polytheist that
Yeah.
became monotheist, and we see that in Genesis.
Oh, there's
Let
all sorts
us
of evidence to
yeah,
support
let
that.
us
Yeah.
create and it's right in Genesis. Let us create blah 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 blah. Okay, and of course that's Jesus. That's what we were told. God and Jesus. That's what we were told in church, right?
Yeah. Retconned a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because we can rewrite history, and that's one thing I'm going to tell you about Dallas is the. I'm going to go off subject here, but this is important. When you read the Bible now, the hardest thing that you can possibly do is not read it like a Christian.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, an example I give is Satan was in the Garden of Eve and um, gave Eve an
Eve.
apple, and then
Yeah.
we had original sin and blah 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 blah. Okay, original sin wasn't even made up. That came from the City of God. Who Saint who was it that wrote City of God? Anyway, that actual phrase, um, original sin, came from that book, and it was floated around a little bit before then, but that's when it became popular.
Yeah.
We know it wasn't an apple, and it was a snake.
Right. He
The
never
author,
says it was Satan.
the author never spoke of Satan. We don't even know that the author understood the Satan concept from that
No.
writing.
And
Or excuse me, from either writing or all seven writings, as it could be. There could be seven authors of Genesis. Of course, you have the two um, Genesis accounts and so forth.
yeah. But no,
Um,
it's not mentioned anywhere in the Bible that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was Satan. That's not even added in the New Testament. That's something that Christians created after the Bible had the current canon we have had already been, you know, agreed on. Like that's just such a later,
mhm.
addition. Just we just assume, oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
Satan.
and it's so hard for me even now to read the Bible because I can even read the Old Testament and say, "Oh, well, this is about Jesus," you know,
Well,
or,
yeah,
or this is how I apply this to my life. Like
yeah. No,
what?
yeah,
Because it's a living Bible, right? It's about you. It's about me. Okay, it's all about me. It's about me.
yeah, and
Right?
it's the same too. Like even reading the New Testament, like we have this streamlined version of the Gospels that we've heard in church and stuff. We don't realize how different they all are. If you go through and read them individually, they're totally different stories. They have very different Jesuses in each one of them.
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
all sorts of contradictions among them, just completely different storytelling. But we look past that when we're reading through because we have this streamlined version in our head, and yeah, no, it's hard to drop all of that conditioning.
I,
um,
absolutely. I found that is so hard for me. But once you kind of learn to do that, it it gets to be pretty amazing what happens.
mm,
I was a garbage man for several years, and
cool.
these people that have these signs up, uh, pray for peace, our nation, peace and prosperity, Isaiah 53, 20, and I started looking at those. I was like, wait a minute, I don't even have to look this up. This is talking about the house of Israel,
Mm,
or talking about the house of Judah, and probably Judah. And anyway, and there's even a story behind that. The even though Israel was bigger and much stronger nation, they got squashed by the Assyrians and the Babylonians and so forth to where they were almost nothing. Judea in the southern district was in the mountains, kind of like Switzerland has that big
mm,
advantage today, and they didn't get screwed with, so they survived all that. Well, then if you look in the Old Testament, whenever God's pissed off at Israel, it was a Judean who wrote that.
yeah,
Because they survived to write the history, and they were pissed off at Israel because they lost to the Assyrians and they lost to the Babylonians, and it hurt them, and they obviously were screwed up with God. So when you look at the Old Testament, you can just look at the writing and tell
yeah,
who wrote it by the bias.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and if you look at, I study modern politics for the same reason,
Mm,
because if you listen to what is being said, then you think about what is actually going on.
mm,
If I say I like blonde people, why would I mysteriously bring that up?
right.
Right? So you
Yeah.
start thinking about, and when you look at the history and the politics there in modern politics, it really does help to give you that perspective.
Hmm. It's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just look at it sometime and think of the Bible and the different scenes that were depicted and so forth, and the rhetoric that you're reading from the Bible and then think of the rhetoric on both sides, and it doesn't even matter. You don't even have to like one side or the other. You can, if you start looking for the rhetoric, you can see it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, this is what this person is saying. What do they want me to believe?
Mm. Yeah,
And
you got
that's
to look
how
at the context surrounding it, which is
and
what Christians don't generally do. You read a verse and you're like, oh, okay, that this says, God will crush, your enemies. So he's
mhm.
going to crush my enemies, right? It's like, well, actually,
And I've gotten so bad to the point where, as a historian, I don't even care about the text anymore, almost.
really?
And what I mean is I want to read the text and figure out the mind of the author, figure out what those biases are. Now, if I know, you're basically like profiling the author.
Mm-hmm. No.
And once you get that profile, who this is, when they wrote it, what country they were from, what their bias are, then you can read that text and have a really good understanding of what's going on. But if you don't have that, if you don't understand the author, you don't understand where he's coming from, what their bias are, then you just have to read it like history, as in a factual account of concordant events. And you're not going to get that from anybody, really.
Mm.
The,
Yeah. Everybody's got a bias.
the closest you can get is like the Diary of Anne Frank.
Hmm.
That's the very closest you can get. And the reason was that she was a 14-year-old girl and there was zero expected audience.
Yeah, that's true.
She had no idea that anyone would ever see it. And so you're kind of getting the raw thoughts of a little girl's mind.
Yeah. So completely unfiltered.
Yeah, and she just doesn't care. She isn't trying to sell anything. But me talking to you, I'm trying to sell my idea of this story to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
See, that's my concept and my value to that story, and I'm trying to sell that idea to you. See, so as an author, whenever we say anything, we are biased.
Mm.
We want someone to believe something
Yeah.
or understand something.
Yeah.
We may want them to have their own opinion on it when they walk away and come to their own choice to rationalize on their own. We may want them to research it on their own and don't even care what they come out with. But that is still something that I want that person to do. So when I look at these, at this like story of Mary Magdalene and so forth, that Jesus was married or whatever, I'm just going to guess that if Jesus had two children and everything else, then this sect thought it was perfectly fine for priests or preachers or whatever to be married. And that was probably I'm taking a wild guess here. But that's probably why this type of thing originated. Just from this little tiny thing.
Yeah.
Just from a one sentence, but I am going at such a far stretch of the imagination that my thoughts could not be considered to be valid. You know what I'm saying? It's just a gross extrapolation here. But a lot of times, if you have a lot more than what I see, and this is only showing about 5 lines here from this particular piece of it looks like papyrus. Um, anyway, so I totally lost my train of thought. So, what are your thoughts on when we get these different? I'm noticing stories like a National Geographic coming up and so forth. Uh, just little stories, more proof of Jesus, more proof of the Christmas story may be true. How do these stories affect you now? What's your perspective on that?
I think most of these stories that come up, like I do see headlines sometimes like, oh, some fragment of some gospel was discovered and it's going to totally change,
Mhm.
what we know of Jesus in the Bible. Usually they're just sensationalized stories, and usually from some discovery from, almost a decade ago. A lot of
That's
the
it.
times when I look into these,
You're
and it
describing this story exactly,
well,
really.
this story fits, yeah, with so many of them. It usually boils down to almost nothing, and the fragment something that's like this one. It's not actually that old, and it's not really going to change anything, and it's not anything we didn't know anyway. It's just something that somebody picked up on, and then all the media outlets are running with it. And a lot of times too, it's because they're building up for some TV show,
Right.
documentary
Right.
type
And that's
series.
exactly what happened with this one. Eventually, it turned into a
I'm not
documentary.
surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did see something about the Bible conspiracies. I know there's a few network shows going on, or that have gone on in recent times about the Bible, and rediscovering the Bible or whatever. And I think that's probably where a lot of these headlines come from, is somebody's pitching them like, hey, we want to get people interested in this. Um, I think it's usually stuff that most Christians even kind of gloss over.
Yeah.
And I definitely usually do.
How did you think of it as a Christian when you saw these stories, or do you remember?
Yeah, no, I remember, a couple times when people said they found Noah's Ark. And I would look into it and I'm like, oh, they didn't really find anything. I was disappointed because I was hoping that's what it was, but it was just like, oh, no, they didn't.
Right.
They're always disappointing.
Exactly. I remember many discoveries that were made, and then nothing. They
Yeah.
weren't. They just weren't. And I kind of got on the academic side, I guess, on
Mhm.
accident.
Yeah.
And it was because I kind of stayed away from the church because I didn't know which church Jesus went to. Um, and I
Right.
had this,
What kind of Christian was Jesus?
yeah, and I kind of got a complex about it because I wanted to be a preacher, right? But I
Yeah.
knew if I went to seminary, I would learn some particular sects,
Mm.
or some particular type of religion, Christian religions biased. And I was like, but everybody has their own bias, and I don't give a crap what you have to say. I
Yeah.
just don't. I want to know whatever God wants me to know. And
Yeah.
so I got this huge complex, really, and I stopped going to church altogether. And then I started getting into academia and studying the Bible very intensely, but I'm looking at different commentaries and so forth. And
Yeah.
then I started reading books that the actual biblical scholars wrote and so forth. And I went on for about 5 years doing that before I even came out as a Christian or as a atheist, before
Right.
I really came out. And that was not my and that wasn't I didn't do that on purpose either. I'll just put it
Oh.
that way. That
Yeah.
was due to my ex-wife.
Oh. Oof. So you were your first interest was like studying the texts, the manuscripts and stuff as a Christian, like.
I did not give a crap what my
Mm,
preacher said.
mm,
I didn't. I wanted to know what Jesus wanted me to know. The only way to know that was to try to get into the mind of Jesus and try to get into the mind of his disciples, because all of the disciples thought exactly what Jesus thought
mm.
in my head.
Okay. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, they all had it right. They were taught by Jesus. They weren't going to come. They weren't going to have their own ideas. They weren't going to stray from anything but what he said. I was a fundamentalist, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so that's how it was going to be. So that was the only way that I could get his words, was from the Bible. So I started studying the words, and then as I started studying, things weren't adding up, and
Mm,
I started doing what Bart Ehrman calls parallel reading of the Bible, and that is where you get his favorite is the Easter scene, the resurrection scene.
yeah. Yeah.
You've
Where
got
Jesus is buried and up until he's resurrected. Yeah.
right, and what you've got, is it in all four Gospels or is it in three?
It's in all four Gospels,
Okay,
and
so
some
yeah,
of
you
it
have four
is
different stories.
in Acts, right? So for a lot
Hmm.
of it, there's actually 5 different stories.
Yeah,
Not all of it, and I think it's Acts. It maybe it's some of Paul. It's one of Paul's writings, but he does mention the resurrection, and there's some parallel there that doesn't add up. Because
right.
I think Paul says that, I'm probably wrong about this, but I think Paul says that after Jesus resurrected, he was on earth for like 40 days,
Hmm.
whereas the Gospels describe it as being a lot less than that,
Right.
all giving different numbers, I think.
No,
But yeah,
well,
yeah,
actually,
anyway, yeah,
Jesus didn't actually rise after 3 days. If you do the math, he rose
mm,
after 2.5.
yeah,
But it was just, and what it was the Greeks wrote it, not understanding how the um, Jewish uh, calendar worked, and that they
oh,
started their days in the evening. And
yeah,
so when the Greeks wrote it, that had started their days in the morning, it was 3 days. But they didn't realize if you go 3 days, what Jesus would have thought it was 2.5 actually.
yeah,
So he didn't fulfill that prophecy. And but when you start looking at those little things like that, um, the one that got me was, did Jesus hang himself, or did his guts explode? And,
Judas, yeah,
now I have even more theories about that. Now I wonder. Um, okay, remember the Jews
hmm,
killed Jesus, right?
yeah,
Who betrayed him? Judas, which comes from the name Judea, the Jew. The Jew betrayed him, and the Jews killed him. I think his entire name was actually a literary device. You
that,
think of
yeah,
the Rock, Peter,
hmm,
literary device. But I think Judas was actually, the name was actually a literary device, because at that point in time when particularly Matthew and Luke were written, as you can see it very, 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 very clearly that they were trying to exonerate the Romans completely. That's where we
hmm,
get the washing our hands scene, and
yeah,
all that stuff that we know never happened, because it never happened. There was never any Roman customs like that ever written at any time. So we know it didn't happen. And of course, the Romans didn't write about that either in their records, which
yeah,
they would have, because they wrote about everything. So
yeah,
we know that was a literary device. So I truly believe that was just like this story that we're looking at of Jesus's wife and kids. The stories kind of meld with the politics of the day.
yeah,
Um,
definitely, yeah,
there's been a lot of speculation that when Jesus talks about the Pharisees, the Pharisees, the Pharisees, the Pharisees, this, the Pharisees, that, everything, everything that he describes is actually the Sadducees.
hmm,
Everything that he takes contention with is the Sadducee law, the ones that were running the temple. But Matthew and the author of Luke Acts want to exonerate the Romans, because they have to deal with the Romans and be a Christian religion in the Roman Empire. So they have to blame it on the Jews. And where this story comes from is, by Roman law, you could not have innovations, is what they were called. That is, new religions.
oh,
They respected the old religions whenever they conquered them. Your gods are great, but you also respect ours. Common courtesy, right? And that's
yeah.
kind of how they looked at it. But
So
just
if you
new
wanted a
religions
new,
popping up, they did not like at all, and
yeah,
they were outlawed. So what the Christians, then you have to take into the Jewish war that finally ended in was it 70? Let's see, it went 64 to 70. Yeah, to 70. So now we're at 70 AD. You have this blossoming Christian religion, the sect of Jews that were Messianic Jews, and the Jews are fighting a war against the Romans. So what they had to do is say, yes, we're Jews, but we're not those Jews,
yeah,
right? We're Christians. We're Messianic Jews. We're not like them. and it worked.
Because it wasn't a new religion. It was just
No, it wasn't a new religion. It was a sect of Judaism, and they wanted to be able to survive. And so they said, we're Jews, but we're not those Jews
yeah.
that just rebelled against you. And then they made all these really exorbitant acts to show that they were different from the Jews. Oh, like Sunday as a Sabbath, worshiping
Yeah.
on Sunday. That's where that actually came from. It came from the Romans, from them trying to separate themselves from the Romans. So you have so many literary things. And when you get these writings, what's amazing, and I can't wait until we get new ones, because just from the context, you can tell about the time it was written and the author's opinions and what maybe were they a Gnostic sect or whatever, but you can get really close and understand without having any idea. And I've actually done that a few times by coming across different things that I wasn't familiar with. And even though I'm a complete amateur, I was able to kind of put it within about 100, 200 years.
Yeah.
And I think that was an Egyptian piece or whatever. And you could just get little clues from here and there. So I think you're almost like being a crime, a cold case kind of
Detective.
historian when you're looking at these pieces.
Yeah.
Let's see what's in chat here. The Atlanta Atheist. I'm going to jump in here and just tell you a quick story. That is my cousin.
Oh, really?
And he started his own YouTube channel, and I started a YouTube channel. And the weird thing is not only did we not know each other, but we had no idea. But he's actually comes from a Mormon family. My
Okay.
uncle became Mormon, so he was kind of going to hell, to some people and
Yeah.
in the family. But it was pretty cool because everybody dropped religion at grandma's door, at their mom's door. They just dropped it.
Hmm.
That generation did, so there was no big deal. But so his family was extremely religious, and so was mine, and we're cousins, and so like I made the video about it was our cousin, the I called the mega evangelist. That was his cousin also, but he
Okay.
had never met that fellow.
That's cool. Yeah. So, I
But
assume he's from Atlanta.
yeah, it's kind of telling though when you have two people that don't know each other from the same family that end up making YouTube channels at about the same time. Isn't that kind of
Yeah.
odd? It makes you
No, it
wonder.
is. Yeah. There was a lot. Was same generation, same age range as me and my family that all left very independently of one another. It was like a mass exodus.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty cool because we kind of like weren't in contact for a few years, and then just in the last few years gotten back in contact, and it's like a whole bunch of us. It's pretty cool though. It's telling too, about
Oh,
what's going on
absolutely.
in our culture right now.
Yeah, we were all originally from Houston, and his father
Mhm.
moved to Alabama.
No
So
way.
I knew his sister and his older brother, half brother and half sister. But I didn't know him in that part. When once my uncle moved, and so I was really close to his other brother and sister. In fact, my daughter is actually named after my cousin.
Oh, cool.
But it was so weird to actually not even know about him, and then boom,
Yeah,
and find all this out. It's pretty
yeah.
interesting.
I'll have to subscribe to his YouTube channel.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen him around before. I'll have to do that.
He's just now finishing up his degree right now, so his channel he's putting content out a little bit at a time.
Well, hey, I mean,
And
that's as good as
and
most of us.
as soon as he graduates and so forth, I think he's planning on going a little bit more serious. Um, but yeah, that's the Atlanta Atheist. I think he's off now.
Okay, well, I subscribed.
But I think that we're probably going to get some new manuscript or something soon. and I know this is going to sound very conspiratorial, but I just think because of the cultural setting today in the United States, I think somebody wants to come up with some kind of big story, whatever, for the evangelist to cling on to. So it might be a new story about the Shroud of Turin, or who knows. But I think something's going to pop up probably in the next 6 months, and it'll be debunked pretty quick, you
Hmm.
know. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that Matt Powell won't, you know, clasp onto it.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's not letting go of anything anyway. But yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised. That's an interesting prediction, and it makes sense too because Christianity has been stale for the last. I don't want to say the last 2,000 years, but the last couple years.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And
it very much has, because there was like this resurgence with like the young Earth creationists. You know, you had
mhm,
AIG popping up and stuff like that, and that rejuvenated Christianity a little bit, or at least I saw that happening where I live. But lately, it's there hadn't really been anything, and I feel like there's been everybody's still Christian, but they've kind of drifted away a little bit.
right. See, I was a teenager during Satanic Panic, and
Oh
for the
yeah.
evangelicals, that was the icing on the cake. That was just beautiful
Mhm.
period of time for the fundamentalists. I mean,
Yeah.
because it was all over the news about these satanic cults and everything. Then after about 6 or 10 years, all of it got debunked. All these people, just turned out to be lying and so forth. But during that period, it was really a huge time for the evangelicals, and I think it's pretty um, at least I would say prudent to consider pushback of anything. If the Trump people feel that they're threatened and that what their beliefs are, there's going to be pushback, and they're going to push back a little bit harder. If the Biden people feel threatened about something, feel that they're not being represented in this, then they're going to get up in arms about that. It's the pushback. You know what I'm saying? And I think right
Yeah.
now, particularly with the political situation, I think the evangelicals are going to feel a little more threatened than usual. And I think in the next 6 months or year, you know, something's going to come up, some story like this. It's just going to be a little spin off of that. It's not anything to do directly with it, but you'll just see some kind of story pop up like this. And it
I
was
think
really,
it'll.
go ahead.
I just want to throw in. I think it's going to be more end times stuff. Since Trump's out of office, and you got Biden coming back in, it'll be the same as what we saw with Obama for 8 years, where everybody was
Mhm,
saying it was the end times, and because he was the Antichrist, and then they were all satisfied with Trump, which is why I think you didn't really see anything,
mhm.
because I don't know why Christians were so attracted to him. So they were kind of like happy, and they were on that Trump train for a few years. But now, they're not going to have their Lord and Savior, so they're going to have to come up with something else. And it'll probably be end time stuff because,
I think you actually are right. I've seen more and more of that lately.
hmm,
Um, it's so hard to debunk that stuff,
the
because
best
it's
thing is
what
just
people
pointing
want to
to,
believe.
yeah, yeah. But, yeah, I've seen it once, twice on Facebook. And I just pointed back to Obama. I was like, weren't you saying that for 8 years? You know, because yeah,
Yeah,
it's just repetitive. I wish they'd come up with something new.
yeah. On, we shouldn't get into politics on this one, but I will say this is
No,
kind of
no,
funny. It's kind of funny. Trump's. Well, we've got a lot of evidence for everything. You believe me? Okay, well, what's your evidence? Well, we got a lot of it.
it's a
Believe
lot of
me,
it.
it's there. It's there. There's a lot of it. Okay, what is? Just give me one piece, just
There's
something.
just so much I can't even pick.
Well, there's a lot of and and now just watching that, and I'm not particularly pro Trump or Biden or whatever, but just watching that, I'm like, this is just like me dealing with Christians every single day on Twitter and on YouTube,
Yeah,
and then it's the same thing. It's like, well, there's a lot of evidence. Okay, great. I'm glad. just one piece, something, you know?
Yeah. And I don't want to get political in here either, but no, like you're saying, like it's literally the same sorts of tactics. Like one is
Mhm.
saying, well, there's a lot of evidence, and when you ask for it, they don't show any. But also, it's just if I say it enough times, it's going to be true,
Yeah.
right? Like Trump just keeps tweeting, I won, I won,
Mhm.
I won, I won by a lot, I won, I won. It's like
Mhm.
it doesn't make it doesn't make it more true by saying it
And
however many times you want to.
that's a lot
Um,
of the psychology of what we see with pieces like this. It
yeah,
really is the same psychology. It's
yeah,
that one more piece of bite of the carrot at the end of the stick. Well, just get a little bite there, and then we'll keep on going forever, you know?
yeah.
And, because I remember as a Christian, when I saw stories like this, I got excited, but, um, I grew out of it, I think a lot earlier than I thought I did
Hmm.
because, I I was told, "Do not, under any circumstances, go outside of basically the church to get information and stuff because
Oh yeah,
Satan controls everything, and all you're gonna get is bad information."
that's exactly what I grew up believing.
And then I was told that through Christ, I could do anything. And I latched onto that part. That's the part I wanted. Okay. So I
Yeah,
was like, wait a minute. If God is leading me, if the Spirit really is leading me, then I should not be afraid of any knowledge. I should not be afraid of any facts because no matter what, they're all going to lead back to God. And they're all going to prove
right.
that God's there and everything that I believe. And I was completely wrong.
Yeah. Well,
I was completely wrong. It sucked.
yeah,
Okay. No, no, Dallas, it sucked
yeah, yeah,
bad.
yeah,
I was devastated for years and years and years, like decades. I was completely devastated. I got to the point where I would not, I couldn't pray. I wouldn't look at the Bible. I wouldn't think of Christianity because it hurt so bad. Everything I believed in was bullshit. And
yeah. No, it does hurt.
it hurt
It is
bad.
devastating.
I still, in a lot of ways, I think you do too, which is going to confuse everyone. And now I'm trapping you. I feel culturally, I am a Christian. In other words, if I was to go, like I've been to Japan and I love that culture or whatever, I was not Japanese. I came from a Christian American culture. There were a lot of things I did not understand. If I was to go to an
Yeah,
Islamic country that was probably predominantly Islamic, nothing wrong with those people. But I would not feel comfortable because I would not understand that culture.
no, yeah. There's definitely some truth to that. Yeah, I mean, you- we we're conditioned. We're programmed by our culture. We grew up in a Christian culture. We're not Christians anymore, but
Mm.
like, there's so much in the way we carry ourselves, act, the way we go about things, the way we
Well,
think about things. It, you're
are you gonna
Christian, you know.
if you find a wallet right outside the door of Safeway, are you gonna pick it up and do the Christian thing or not?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And yes, of course I would do the Christian. Wait, no, I'm not a Christian, but yes, I would do the
No.
Christian thing. I would do the right thing because I would want to do the right thing. You
Yeah.
know, I don't care about. I would want to feel good about myself, so I would do. But I could just say as easily say it's a Christian thing to do because I still kind of think that way in some respects that what my morals, my values, and so forth in this country. I'm American. I can't help it. That's how I grew up, and so my values fall in line with that. And a lot of those are deemed Christian, and a lot of them are Christian,
Yeah.
but
But
most
I
of
mean,
them are just behaving and being a good human being is deemed to be Christian, and that's not. That's being a good human being.
yeah, and I was gonna clarify that too. Like, yeah, I mean, Christianity doesn't own a copyright on human decency. Yeah, a lot of Christian values are just basic human decency. And so we originally got those values from church, from Christianity. But I mean, yeah, they're not like it's not like thou shalt not steal didn't exist before the Bible was written. There's still
Right.
people like, hey, don't steal shit. Like,
Hmm.
but no, but I think you could even get down to a nuance level, though. We still have certain things are still embedded in us that are more Christian than just like, hey, be nice to people, don't steal stuff.
Hmm.
And I do kind of find that from time to time. It'd be kind of hard to think of an example, but no.
I'll put you on the spot. When you married your wife, did you consider talking to the family at least about, I want to marry this woman, at the very least?
Well, in my case, no, absolutely not. That wasn't a
No,
consideration.
but were there considerations that you took that you can look back on, and then like a church or whatever, that kind of stem from your Christian background, that you maybe not have thought of, you
Yeah.
know?
And I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's kind of hard to think of something more nuanced, something more.
Well, like even the ceremonies of how we'll have a wedding and then a reception.
Right. Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a very and we don't even think of a reception as having anything to do with God or whatever. But if you go through history, these
Mm,
rites and rituals or whatever have been passed down. Now they may not have um, religious significance to a lot of people, but they're still there.
yeah. One example I can think of, which isn't so much a value, but like prayer, right?
Mhm,
Like I was so used to saying a prayer just like the freaking drop of a hat, just like
mhm,
thousands of small prayers throughout my day as a Christian. And
mhm,
that's still a habit I still kind of have. I don't believe that I'm talking to anyone,
mhm,
but I still, if I'm stressed out, if I'm going through something, or just any, or I'm just doing something mundane, I still have a habit of kind of processing things in a way where I'm praying, even though I don't actually believe I'm talking to anyone, but I still go through the same motions. That's something I still do.
mhm.
And I think there's a lot of stuff like that. Um, what would you call them?
It's just
Kind
things
of,
like "bless you" when somebody
right.
sneezes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still I don't have a real problem with that at all. If someone wants to say "bless you," or
No.
they're trying to be nice or whatever, and I don't even care if, boy, it happened to me and my fiance recently. Somebody once said, "Well, God bless you," or "God be with you," or something, and this woman was just being genuine.
Yeah.
She had, my fiance had mentioned a health issue with her family or whatever, and this person just uttered a blessing. Well, are they trying to invade my life, or no? She was
No.
just being a
No.
good, great person,
Right.
expressing
Yeah.
her concern. And so, yeah, I'm absolutely good with this.
I respect that about you, because I do get pissed off when I hear atheists complaining about stuff like that, like when somebody actually means well. It's like, dude, get over yourself, okay?
Hmm.
It's all right. it's,
Well,
it's not
I
hurting you. Um,
I originally was born in Houston, and I say ma'am.
oh yeah.
And my part of the country, in Colorado, that's not a thing, but I always say ma'am. And
Hmm.
I explained it to my girlfriend recently. I had a teacher when I came to Colorado that said, "Don't say ma'am," and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And
Yeah.
the reason is because in that culture, if you did not say ma'am, it would be the equivalent, and I'm not exaggerating here, of saying, "Okay, fuck you."
Hmm.
It would literally, it's that bad. I'm not
Yeah.
kidding you.
I,
It's culturally, and so to me, by her asking me not to say that, it was like her asking me to say, "Okay, fuck you." which would mortified me.
Yeah.
So
No.
yeah, we have a lot of those things like, God bless you, somebody sneeze or whatever, I don't care. If
Yeah.
people want to be good people, then great.
Yeah.
Um, there's a preacher I work with. I'm I really contemplating on making a video about interaction we had here recently. I respect the fellow.
Mm.
He does a lot of good for the community.
Yeah.
We do a lot of projects with the Marine Corps League and so forth that helps veterans or whatever. Not militant organization. It's just to help people. And we do projects all together, together all the time. And I don't mind that he tries to do good.
Right.
I
Yeah.
respect that about him. Sometimes it comes out in his religion, and
Yeah.
I it appalls me. I'm not kidding you. It literally makes me sick. Some of the things that he does, but I
Yeah.
realize that he is trying to do the right thing, and I respect him for that.
Yeah. No, I respect some local churches around here that do good, and they're not the like terribly dogmatic ones. Coincidentally, the more tame churches tend to be the ones that are more active in the community.
Hmm.
Um, interesting.
And the
But
poor churches,
yeah, yeah.
rich churches do not have food banks. The
Mm,
richer the church, the less they do. It
yeah.
gets really weird, and even the congregation get really weird. It's rich congregations are very strange.
Yeah. Yeah, they also tend to just not really be a part of a denomination. They're just their own brand.
Mhm.
Um,
Have you
there-
ever been
there-
to a church or had experience with a church where a pastor drove a Ferrari or a Porsche or
Not that far, no.
yeah, and they get out there. I mean, just
There are some churches like that, like the ones that my in-laws go to. It's just called Life Church. It's not even
mhm.
just one. They're basically a chain of churches, fairly new. But they're not a denomination. They're just a brand. And you can buy their T-shirts, you can buy their whatever. They've got a coffee shop and stuff too. But yeah, it's pretty convenient, that it's not taxed.
So I'm going to go completely off subject here and ask
Okay.
you about your videos and stuff. You
Yeah.
you made a great series here recently on the mystic. Is that would be a good way to spiritual? How would you put that?
Paranormal.
Paranormal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, my fiance is a witch.
That's very cool.
And actually, I think it's very cool. I don't
Yeah.
know if I've explained this, but she knows she is a fifth generation witch from Hungary. So her great great grandmother was a witch in Hungary, and probably her grandmother and so forth. She's thinking maybe at least seventh, but she knows for positive fifth generation.
Wow.
Well, then here's compelled unbeliever,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And now this has been kind of interesting for us because as a fundamentalist, just as you are,
Mm-hmm.
I understand believing in something.
Yeah.
I understand believing in something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I understand truly, really believing it. And I have never actually said this live before, but I was to the point that at one point in time, that if someone had put a gun to my head and said, deny Jesus, I would have said no and taken the bullet
Yeah.
to my head.
Yeah.
I
No. No.
believed like that. And that's why, and I know sometimes you see me get a little bit snarky with people when they start telling me that I wasn't a real Christian. That bothers me
Yeah, that bothers me too. That's
because I know at one point in time I literally would have taken a bullet for Jesus.
Well, yeah, you believed it as much and more so than most of the butts sitting in pews on church and on
Hmm.
Sunday.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's just completely disrespectful to say that you were never a Christian.
All right. So that being said, she doesn't really care about being a witch. The only
Mm,
reason that when it first came up, I when I first met her, I said, "Look, I'm an atheist. Is that a problem?" She said, "I'm a witch. Is that a problem?" I was like, "Okay, let's go with this." But I didn't know what she meant. I thought she was more like, into Wicca and just thought that was kind of cool
yeah,
stuff. No, no, she grew up with this stuff. She doesn't really do a lot of rites or rituals. It doesn't come up in day to day things or anything else. Sometimes I will ask her questions about her beliefs and then she will tell me. And I tell her, and she knows flat out. She's like, I know you don't believe in any of that. I said, no, I don't believe in the spiritual. I can tell you that there are things that happen around me and that have happened around me that I cannot explain. Um, Things that a lot of people would call ghost. I'll even
right.
say that. A lot of things that have happened to me that I cannot explain. Can I automatically attribute them to ghosts, spirits, whatever? No,
Yeah,
I just can't. I used to,
yeah,
but I can't now. And so, with that understanding, I guess I have a lot of respect towards her as a human being.
yeah, yeah,
She knows I don't believe it. She knows I don't respect religion. She doesn't respect religion either, actually. It's just a thing that's out there to be dealt with. But as
yeah.
far as being a witch, that's something that she grew up in, something that she believes in. And she believes in kind of like certain psychic powers and abilities and so forth.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, okay, honey, I understand that you believe this. I don't. But and there are certain things that she wants me to do sometimes and certain things that she doesn't because of superstition and so forth. Um,
Yeah.
like I had a Ouija board in my apartment. She didn't want it in her house.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to take it out to the shed. And her problem was the box was opened. If it was closed,
The
that
ghost
would have
couldn't get
been fine. And then she had a problem with you, Mr. Wade,
out. Oh no.
because you did not close your Ouija board properly, whatever the hell that means. I have no idea. But
It,
she
it
she criticizes. She likes your videos. She
oh.
criticizes you, and she's like, "Okay, this is cool. No, 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 he doesn't know about this, whatever." And this
Well,
is the things that have been brought down through her family. And
yeah.
if you talk to a different witch, they may believe something completely different, just like in Christianity.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think the one thing was because I did get a comment from somebody saying that I didn't say goodbye at the end of my session, but I actually did every time I used the Ouija board. I didn't think about that being important enough and I cut
Mhm.
it out. But I did do it. Like I cut, I edited that part out. I didn't realize that people would be like, "Whoa, whoa, you didn't say goodbye."
Yeah.
I did though, but
Right, right.
I should have thought about the significance of that to these believers.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But it's very, very interesting for us because obviously she watches my videos. She'll watch this one. Um, she doesn't say much,
Oh yeah.
and we don't talk about stuff a lot. Sometimes something will set me off a little bit, and she'll put up with my BS while I rant.
Yeah.
But we really don't talk about religion that much, and we don't talk about witchcraft that much.
Mm.
I did, we're going to be getting married, and so I said, "Is there anything in particular that you think is important, or anything?" And she said she would take care of whatever that was, and that's fine,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you know. But I think it's very, very interesting because there are a lot of very strong superstitious beliefs that she has, and and this family it's not gypsy as in we think of American gypsies or what you see on the TV or whatever, but there is that Hungarian uh, mysticism
Mm.
that has carried over into her family, but they appear to be completely American. You would never know, except they
Mm.
have these just different things, like even if like how you set your knife on the plate and where you
Oh
set the
really?
knife and stuff. Yeah, it's like you got to do it a certain way, and so I will admit it. Sometimes it's a little annoying. It's like
Yeah.
okay, I got to remember where how to put the knife. What? Like,
Yeah,
and then wait, is this just a habit that they have, or is this actually a superstitious thing that? And I don't want to screw up what they think their karma is, or you know what I mean?
right. Yeah,
Oh, and so yeah, it's in that respect, but it's been actually not a big issue for us,
that's
which
good. I would think there'd be more of an issue if you were religious, because religious people tend to be more unkind to witches than non-believers, I would think.
right, and I literally consider her to be a witch,
Mm,
and I don't think she has any supernatural magic powers or psychic powers or anything.
yeah,
But culturally, just like we were talking about, culturally she is a witch, and she does truly believe it, just like we believed in our fundamentalist beliefs when we were younger.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's
I
kind of like,
can't change that, and I'm not going to. I don't even care.
yeah,
She's not trying to sell anything dangerous.
right. Yeah, I don't have a problem with what anybody believes at all, as long as it's not being, they're not forcing it on other people, or it doesn't cause them to do bad things. Like, even like with Christians, like a lot of Christians, I don't care that they're Christian, and I wouldn't care to take that away from them, because,
Hmm.
for some of them, Jesus just is this kind of figure that inspires being a good person, and that's pretty much it. And hey, I'm not going to take that away from them, you know. Um, yeah, I don't care what people believe. It's the harmful stuff that I have a problem with. And so, with what I've noticed with most of people who are into like witchcraft and things like that, typically they're very progressive people, and
Hmm.
there's not actually any harm coming from their beliefs, like far less so than with religious beliefs.
Well, actually, to tell you the truth, when she said she was a witch, I was like, "Oh boy!" And what I was like, I was afraid that she was going to be like, "Oh, and I want to be one with the trees," and you know, you know,
Yeah,
uh, out there, Fruit Loop kind of. No, she's just like, "No, I'm a witch," and that's some people have brown hair. you know, that's how she is about it.
yeah,
And and so yeah, that makes that part pretty easy. I think as a fundamentalist, though. Um, I would have been terrified of her.
yeah, yeah,
In fact, I would be convinced that I was demon possessed now because I actually had the sex with her. And so I would literally think I was demon possessed,
yeah,
coming
yeah,
from the fundamentalist beliefs that I had. It's really scary when you kind of look back at what you thought or what you believed.
yeah.
That's the scariest place that I have,
Mm.
actually, is believing what I did, knowing that I would take a bullet for Jesus. That
It
being said, how much further would it have been if I thought that Jesus had said something to me to hurt someone or do something? I mean, I was ready to. I believed enough that I would have died. So that's pretty strong. So I imagine it wasn't much further before I could have been flying airplanes into buildings. See what I'm saying?
No,
No,
yeah,
what
yeah.
kind of break could have happened? Maybe something bad in my life or whatever, and I met the wrong person,
Some
and boom, boom,
psychological
boom, boom.
disorder, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and then here I am flying an airplane into a building.
yeah.
I think about those things, you know.
No, it is scary to think about, and especially when people that have beliefs that strong, and then their ego or whatever hijacks what they believe is God, and then all of a sudden every thought and every action that they take is then justified,
Hmm.
with their religion,
Well,
because
I
oh
got
well,
to the
no,
point that I attributed everything that happened to me to God.
yeah,
If
yeah.
someone said hi, hello, well, why did God want him to say hello? Should I have actually to talk to him about Jesus. I got really fucked up in the head. Okay, I'm not kidding you. I did. I was there. I literally would think if someone said hi. What does that? What does God think?
No, yeah, I mean, I thought that everybody that was in my life, or everybody I came in contact with, was put there for a reason.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of crazy once you get to looking at it, and I think that's what kind of makes it sometimes hard with my girlfriend, because she believes in that kind of destiny thing, that certain things
Right.
are meant to be or whatever, and
Yeah.
I'm like, and I think she's the most wonderful woman I've ever met. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of like, well, yeah, we actually just were two human beings that bumped into each other at the right time, and we're a great combination. But there's billions of people on this planet, and we are monkeys that want to screw, and we would have found someone that we loved also. And I really love you, you know, and it's
Yeah.
real, but it doesn't mean that there's destiny. And so
Yeah.
trying to actually have that conversation with my girlfriend, basically saying, yeah, you're not that special and I'm not that special either.
Yeah.
That
It's
was
not
the
the most romantic thing in the world.
no, it's not, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so I'm
Yeah.
a realist in that sense, you know. That much of a realist, and that here I have a witch girlfriend that believes that we were actually destined for a reason to be together, and that's how it's supposed to be. Period.
Yeah. I don't think there's, well, to an extent, there's not any harm in thinking in that way. It can maybe help some people appreciate things more. The the part where that becomes dangerous or harmful is when something traumatic happens and then you try to figure out, well, what was the reason for that happening?
Hmm.
It's like, well, there wasn't, it's just unfortunate. But people pick and choose, and so I guess if you just want to choose the good stuff and say that that happened for a reason, then that's okay. But then what sort of what sort of reasoning is that? I don't know. I don't like to look at things too nihilistically though either. Um, you know.
Well, okay, if we go into that, I'm deeply a nihilist and not at all. I don't know where to put it. Yes, in a billion years, nobody cares.
No.
In a billion years, there probably won't be space creatures that know that we ever existed. You know,
Yeah.
so in that sense, does anything matter? No, not in a trillion years or whatever. No, but in my life, for me, if it's just to make me feel good, I want to help people.
Yeah.
I want to better mankind. And if that's my only purpose in life is just being a selfish son of a bitch, trying to get that high from helping people, so what? Great, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so in a trillion years, yes, nobody know. I'm a nihilist, but do I have purpose in life? Yes. Self satisfaction, that horrible self satisfaction of helping people, of just feeling good about myself. And I
Yeah.
am really being kind of serious here. You know,
No.
I
Yeah.
do like to help people, and that's what makes me feel good. And is it selfish? I don't care if it is or not. If it is selfish and that's what compels me to go do good things, then great. So who cares if it's selfish, right? It's helping other people.
Yeah. No, I get behind that. There's definitely a very rewarding feeling to being a good person.
Hmm.
Even acting selflessly is rewarding, um, which is kind of a contradictory, but not really thing. You know, realizing that, wow, I'm making a sacrifice for somebody. I'm making somebody else's life better,
Hmm.
even at my expense. That's gratifying, and that's usually what motivates me. Um, even if that ultimately doesn't matter. I don't know.
Right, right. The and that kind of comes back to what we were talking about. Kind of feel like a Christian in some respects as far as culturally. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
it's just that I understand now that actually, if I needed a god to not want to kill and rape people, that would be a very bad thing.
Yeah.
If I had to have a God tell me that was a bad thing for me to not to want to do it, that's very, very bad. That's very bad. And I don't have a God. I don't believe there is a God, and I don't want to do those things. I don't. Those things bother me. I don't want to hurt people, you know. And
Yeah.
so now I've really made that separation as far as the morality. Do I know where morality comes from? Is it just chemical processes? Uh, like Matt Powell would want to say, well, yeah, actually, probably that chemical process combined with the electrical synapses and so forth, whatever makes our mind whatever it is and gives us our feeling and emotions. That's all that I got, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if my morals or something got to come from that, whatever that is, you know. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a soul or
Mm.
a spirit or a God, or that God has to make me do that. Evolution itself answers that question. That when we tend to cooperate and have a instinct to take care of each other, we're going to survive. And if we didn't have any of those instincts, we would not.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, not a one of us would survive on our own. We survive a lot better when we help each other survive. Um,
Hmm.
and that very well maybe probably is the basis of morality, why we have this intrinsic desire to be empathetic and stuff, because
Hmm.
that's why we're here. And maybe, I'm always open to the possibility maybe that was put there by some higher power. Yet I'm not saying I believe it, but if somebody wants to propose it, sure, maybe. Either way, whatever that morality is, wherever that's coming from, whatever is causing it to be inherent to my person, that's what I'm going to go with. Whether I end up in the ground or I end up in some freaking kingdom in the clouds one day. Um,
And
I'm not doing
frankly,
it
it's
for that reason.
frankly, where does morality come from? I put in the same department as what was our origins, the origin of the universe. I don't
Mm,
know,
yeah.
but I'm glad it's there.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad there is an origin to the universe, if that's what you want to call it, and I'm glad the morality's there, but
Yeah.
I do not have to explain it.
Right.
It
Yeah.
doesn't help anyone. We have survived for as long as we could be called human beings. Is that 20, 100,000, 200,000 years, whatever, at whatever point we were called human beings, that's what we are as moral beings and so forth. That we can't help that, and that's good. That we don't have to answer those questions.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
what's the origin of
I
the
agree with that.
universe? It doesn't even matter if Jesus was a human being or if he was not a historical person. 2,000 years of Christianity doesn't care. That history is already written about by people who did believe it. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, yeah.
you know. Now today, would it be wonderful to know one way or the other? Yes,
Yeah.
because then we could answer more questions about human beings and how folklore or mythology or history or whatever you want to call it, how those things are passed on and how we understand them, perceive them, and so forth. And so it's the facts that matter in that respect. And that's why the facts don't matter about whether he was a human being in history prior to today, because it was pretty much thought that he did, and Christianity and people behaved in such manner and did certain things based on those beliefs, and
Yeah.
that cannot be changed. So it is important. The Bible is important. Whether I believe it's all factual information, it doesn't matter. But it is a historical document that has been around for a long, long time that people have lived their lives by and made life decisions by.
Yeah. Yeah. It's impacted the world more than anything else in the last 5,000 years, probably.
Right. And
Yeah.
so my purpose for having this channel is challenging the truths or reality of the Bible and separating simply what is history What can we say is history? What is legend? And there are good sayings. There are good things that can be
Sure.
taken from the
Yeah.
Bible. I mean, the golden rule, it's not an original to the Bible, but it's a darn good idea.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, we can chop it apart, we can criticize it, we can even build upon it or whatever, but I think everybody's got the general idea. That's a great thing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
It definitely
Um,
doesn't hurt if that's people's takeaway from Christianity. If that's all they get into, cool. Awesome.
right. In
Right.
general, if you've dedicated yourself self to someone, it's not a good idea to be unfaithful to them.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
general, it's just pretty much a good idea to be faithful to whoever you're with, or even if you want to have open relationships or whatever. Then, if you're honest about that, hey, now we're talking about honesty. It's a good idea
Yeah.
to be honest, and like you.
Yeah.
And once again, those are what we are told is uh, being a good Christian. Well, actually, it's just good ideas. Christianity is not necessary for
Right.
those
Yeah.
ideas. Religion isn't even necessary for those ideas.
No. Well, for some people, I think it may be. There may be a future where we don't need religion for it, but I don't think humanity would function very well right now. The majority of humanity, if you took religion out of the picture, I do think, and this is just an opinion piece from me, but I do think that a large number of people do need religion to have morals and standards. Unfortunately, that's kind of what I observe with local humans around me.
Yeah, I'm okay. Part of me wants to agree with you on that, and part of me, I kind of question that because they're okay. I'll just put it this way: I do not disagree with you. I do call it into question in a healthy
Yeah.
sense. To be
I
healthy,
would say, in theory, definitely you do
hmm
not need religion for people to be good. But realistically,
practically, yeah, and I
yeah.
understand. And for some people, you may be absolutely correct, but during World War II, it was I believe in Indonesia. There's an Indonesian island out there, and the United States. It was the Army Air Corps flew
Okay.
over this area, and it had a population of 1 million people, and they had never had outside contact with anyone, and they
Hmm.
had no religion. There was no God concept or spirit concept,
Oh, wow.
and there's 1 million people, and they had never had
Mm.
outside contact. And there are some other tribes and so forth that have in history been found that didn't have a God concept as we think of it, a spiritual concept. There weren't
Wow.
even ancestor worship or
That's
spirits in trees or anything.
that's
Um,
fascinating.
right, and but they had structured societies, obviously.
Yeah.
So in the one hand where I tend to want to agree with you, I just don't know. I cannot say it's true. Just as you were saying with the agnosticism, you're kind of touched on that. I cannot say that there is some unknowable God that I don't know about because by definition I wouldn't know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so that God could certainly exist. There could have been some power that create. I don't know.
Yeah.
How the hell should I know? What I can say is the God of the Bible does not exist. The Christian God is not
Absolutely.
real.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
The the God of Islam is not real. The
Yep.
Jewish God is not real. The Abrahamic God is not real. It is a Canaanite God that that was probably a Sumerian God before that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But for sure, the Christian God is not an actual God. I can say that.
No
So
hesitation. No.
no
Just
hesitation. That's why I hate the Dawkins scale 1 to 7. He considers
oh.
himself a 6 because it does not consider the agnostic and the atheist aspects. In other words, do I know, making a knowledge statement, a Gnostic statement, do I know there is not a God? No. I cannot know that.
Right.
Am I absolutely certain 100% that the Christian God does not exist? Yes, absolutely certain. But I'm not saying that a God could not exist by any means.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you look at the Bible is self-evident that God cannot exist. And like you touched on earlier, we have many, many opinions of the four gospels. It's beautiful because in Mark we have this suffering Messiah that was kind of appointed, maybe a human being. And then Luke and John, he gets more godlike and gets more powerful. And then by John, he is God.
Right.
Right? He is
Yeah.
absolutely, he's the Alpha, the Omega. That's how it starts out in that gospel.
Yeah. Well, even in Mark, Jesus just died, and that was it. Because the original ending, the women just ran out of the cave, and they didn't
Right.
even tell anybody about it. It was just,
Right.
oh, Jesus was dead.
Yeah, so he was a suffering Messiah of sorts, but he wasn't even necessarily God. Or
No.
and of course the Trinity. Okay, I'm sorry, Matt Powell. Since I hope you've watched this far, I'm sorry, Matt, but Jesus never heard of the Trinity, and neither did any of the authors of the Bible. Not one of them heard of the Trinity. Not one. They didn't know. The thought had not been thought up yet. It was made up later. It was made up
Yeah.
way later.
I
And
hope
because
I hope Matt Powell watches this.
did you see Reverend Faithful?
I did.
The
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
him and
Reverend
Matt.
Faithful is Matt Powell's father.
Yes.
Confirmed.
Yes,
Yeah.
confirmed.
I don't know how I didn't know. It was just right there.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. When I
Yeah.
made that video, okay, I have to apologize for Reverend Faithful. I do have the serious videos, and this is kind of one of them where we talk about some serious things here. Um, but it's like my outlet. Reverend Faithful is all the cringy things I grew up with, all the cringy things that I saw, just put on steroids, taken a little bit further, and in some cases not taken further. But that's what
Yeah.
Reverend Faithful is. All the cringe that I ever saw. That's what Reverend Faithful is. And
You successfully put all of that cringe together and produce something just beautifully cringy.
yes, it is. I'm actually I am kind of thinking that Reverend Faithful actually should get a little more attention than he does
Oh
because
yeah.
he's so awful.
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
your whole channel needs a lot more attention. I
I
keep checking too because you were at 299
mhm,
subscribers, and I keep hoping because I'd shared this link a few times on my
mhm.
Facebook and Twitter. I keep hoping you'll get that 300th.
Yeah,
If any of my viewers are watching and you're not subscribed to Compelled Unbeliever, go ahead and do that. Okay, just do it. Make it
thank
happen.
you, thank you. Yeah, I in the last 2 years since I started the channel, I've gotten a divorce, and now I'm actually engaged again. And there was a move from Colorado to Oregon and back, and so there's
Mhm.
been a lot of different things happening. So I haven't been
Yeah,
able to be as consistent as I've wanted to be, and I also haven't done quite as much on Bible scholarship as I would like to. But
yeah.
this video kind of touched on that because most people don't know about the Gnostic writings. And like I said, they're it's throwing everything into one hat. It would almost be like throwing all world religion into one hat and calling it, uh, you know, something ism, religionism as a religion. Well, you can't do
Religionism.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not. They're just too. Hey, Stags,
yeah. We got a few
I'm
people showing up
frustrated
now.
now, and now BJ coming in.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
But yeah, so with the last video that I made with the women's shelter with the Reverend Faithful, I wasn't sure that it was cringy enough. believe it or not. And so I had my son sit down and watch it. And, he had to grow up with my humor, so he
Oh
knows
yeah.
kind of what's coming. But when he was almost in tears on that one, I was like, okay, I think I did something good here. He
Yeah.
was literally in tears. And I was like, ooh, that must be really bad.
No, you do a really good job with
Well,
Reverend Faithful.
what's kind of jacked up is I like to go to the extreme of plausible,
Hmm.
the absolute extreme of plausible. And yes, like the last video, you could have some front from a woman's shelter end up taking advantage of young women.
Oh
That's
yeah,
completely plausible.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so that's why I make those types of videos, the Reverend Faithful videos, to show you how awful it can be. A lot of that came from I'm an ordained minister, and I did make a video about that. And it was through the First Church of Atheism. Now they're not doing any more ordinations right now, but I was like, this has got to be crap, because basically all you did was just fill out a form and you're ordained.
Yeah.
And in one particular video, I made the statement that literally, if a church basically all they have to do is file with a certain municipality, a local municipality, that they're a church. If they want to ordain their ministers based only on the one stipulation that they be a convicted pedophile, they can ordain on that. It's completely up to the church. So,
Mm.
with that being the case, now I'm not suggesting that any church has done that, but I'm saying it's
Right.
possible. If
Yeah.
that is possible, then ordination means nothing. And that really saddened me, to tell you the
Yeah.
truth. It really did sadden me. To realize that ordination really wasn't anything. I was a Methodist, and as Methodists, they had to go to seminary, and then they were basically assigned to a church, kind of.
Yeah.
You were more evangelical, weren't you?
Yeah. So I was a member of the Church of Christ.
Yeah. How did they
Um,
choose their pastors?
the elders of the church could choose the pastor. If there weren't elders at a church, then it was just the congregation. The men, actually,
Mm-hmm.
the baptized men of the congregation, would vote on a pastor, which they called preachers. They didn't call them pastors because they call things different things because they're different.
They want to be different. It's
Yeah.
just like the JWs.
Yeah.
They'll use certain terminology and so forth that's specific to them,
Yeah.
just like yours did. That's a very cultish thing. It's
It
pretty
is super
typical.
cultish, and
Yeah.
the Church of Christ is very cultish. Most denominations are, but the Church of Christ, as much as most, the worst of them.
Yeah. See, I
Um,
was a Methodist, and from what I understand, Methodists are actually more mellow, more moderate. But
mm,
the sect I came from obviously was extremely fundamentalist. I mean, they were as far as you go. I saw a guy just about 3 months ago, ran into the fellow who at my youth group, he played guitar. He was one of the youth
mm,
pastors.
yeah,
And I saw him, and I pretty much got the feeling off the bat that he wasn't very Christian and so forth. And I remember I asked him, I was like, "Do you remember the things that were being said and taught? Like, everybody like was Satan." I was told that to beware of the pastor, because Satan was
really.
such a trickster that the best person for Satan to get inside of was the pastor, to
Uh,
deceive us all. So we had to check up on the pastor too, because he might be. That's the kind of fear that was being instilled in me at 12 years old. I,
you can't trust anybody. Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You couldn't,
No,
I
that's
was literally told we could not trust our leader. That was the kind of
yeah.
paranoia that was going on. So, and And with my hallucinations and so forth, I had a God experience.
Mm.
Are you familiar with my hallucinations? Uh, Basically, it's a type of narcolepsy.
No.
When I go to sleep, I start to dream before I actually
Okay.
go
Okay.
conscious. So what happens is I go ahead and fall unconscious. When I wake up, that dream is filed away into my memory as a memory, not as a dream, because I was
Okay.
still awake. I was still
Right.
awake when it happened. So if there was a literal elephant in the room, I will literally see, smell that elephant in the room. It's just a memory.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
sometimes I have to ask my family if it's something mundane. Did Dallas say he was looking at a Ford pickup the other day? Well, I may have. I don't know if I may have
Hmm.
had that conversation with you, but it could have been a dream. And if it was a
Okay.
dream that if I, it was a dream that you were looking for a truck, I don't know
Hmm.
because it filed away in my memory. So I have to ask people. Maybe I
Yeah.
didn't even see you that day or whatever. So
Yeah.
I had a God experience with perfectionism. I'm an extreme perfectionist. So I had a hallucination, a God experience, and I was a perfectionist, so I wanted to be a perfect Christian.
Hmm.
So I had actually literally seen God and interacted with God, and I was a perfectionist. And here I was introduced into this fundamentalist cult, which couldn't be a better place to put me.
Right. That's about
Because
as
I was
unhealthy
already,
of a combination as you can get.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
had everything not going for me.
Yeah.
But then eventually I figured out that I was in a cult, and I figured out that God didn't exist, and I figured out that I was having hallucinations, and you know, everything went okay from there.
No.
Anyway, I think we've almost gone what, an hour and a half here, 2 hours.
I
I
think.
think we better cut out
Yeah.
of here.
Getting close to 2 hours. Yeah.
Anyway, I've enjoyed this very, very much so.
Yeah. Me
Um,
too.
uh,
Absolutely.
I don't. You know what? I'm going to put the link in the description when I put this up later. But I don't know. Yeah, can we get? Yeah, I'm going to try to get to your channel real quick and put a link in the description.
Appreciate it.
And up and coming is a great video that I'm going to plug right now. This is one of the best videos that you will ever watch, and it is called Dallas Wade Sucks.
What the heck?
And I've been preparing for this video for a little while. I don't know when I'm going to get it made, but look for it. Dallas Wade Sucks. It will be up and coming as a tribute.
Okay. About
So
what kind of a time frame can we expect on that?
I don't know. I'm hoping in the next month or so. I've
Okay.
I've been gathering materials and so forth.
I'm
it's
looking forward to
it's
that.
been in the works. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get on out of here.
All right.
Dallas, and you have a good one, and thank you very much for coming on. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I think we should do it again,
Yeah,
even
we
though we went
definitely.
all over the place.
I'll have you on my channel soon.
Okay, sounds
If you're
good.
down for that.
Oh,
Yeah. But
sounds great.
thanks for having
Uh,
me on.
okay, well, thanks a lot. You have a good one.
Yeah, you too.